The discovery the morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus Chen's wheat fields as he walked the familiar path between the golden stalks. His weathered hands moved automatically, checking for signs of disease or pest damage that could destroy his meager harvest. At 45, Marcus had learned that survival on the frontier planet of Novaterra required constant vigilance and an unforgiving work ethic. The farm had been much larger once, when Sarah and little Tommy were still alive, before the Crimson Plague swept through the outer colonies, taking his wife and 8-year-old son within the same terrible week. Now, 3 years later, Marcus worked alone on the reduced plot of land that he could manage by himself. The isolation had become his companion, as familiar as the ache in his back from long days of labor. Marcus paused at the edge of his property, watching the dual suns of Novaterra climber into the purple-tinged sky. The planet's unique atmosphere gave everything a dream-like quality, though life here was anything but a dream. It was hard, unforgiving work that left little time for contemplation. He had been a veterinarian once, back on Earth, but those skills seemed like a lifetime ago. The weather alert on his communicator chirped insistently, drawing his attention to the incoming storm. The display showed a massive system approaching from the west, with winds that could flatten his crops if he didn't secure everything properly. Marcus sighed and began the familiar routine of storm preparation. He had learned to read Novaterra's volatiles, and this one looked particularly fierce. As darkness fell, the storm hit with unprecedented fury. Rain lashed against the reinforced windows of his small farmhouse while thunder shook the very foundations. Marcus sat in his kitchen, drinking synthetic coffee and listening to the wind howl outside. These storms usually passed quickly, but this one seemed to grow stronger by the hour. A brilliant flash of light, different from lightning, illuminated the sky. The light was blue-white and seemed to streak across the heavens before disappearing behind the hills. Marcus frowned, pressing his face against the window. In his 3 years on Novaterra, he had never seen anything like that. The light had been too steady, too purposeful to be natural. The storm continued to rage for several more hours before finally moving on, leaving behind an eerie silence. Marcus ventured outside at first light, expecting to find his usual cleanup. Chores, broken branches, scattered equipment, and the occasional damaged crop were normal after such storms. What he found instead changed his life forever. A smoking crater marked his wheat field, about 50 meters from his house. The twisted remains of something metallic lay scattered around the impact site, clearly not from any human technology. The metal had an unusual shimmer to it, like oil on water, and strange symbols were etched into the larger pieces. Marcus approached, cautiously, his heart pounding with equal parts fear and curiosity. Near the center of the crater, partially buried under alien debris, lay a pod about the size of a large coffin. The surface was smooth and warm to the touch, with a faint humming sound coming from within. Marcus circled the pod several times, debating whether to report his discovery to the colonial authorities or investigate further himself. The nearest government outpost was 3 days away by hoverbike, and by the time they arrived, whatever was inside might be dead. A soft sound from within the pod made his decision for him. It was weak, but unmistakably the sounding. Alive and in distress. Marcus's veterinary training kicked in, overriding his caution. He examined the pod's surface until he found what appeared to be a seam. When he pressed his palm against a glowing symbol, the pod hissed open with a release of strange-smelling gas. Inside lay a small figure, clearly not human, but undeniably a child. The being was about the size of a human 8-year-old, with pale, blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. 2 large eyes, deep purple and remarkably expressive, stared up at Marcus with a mixture of pain and terror. The child's breathing was labored, and dark blue fluid seeped from several wounds. On her delicate limbs, Marcus's professional instincts took over. He could see that the child was dying, and species didn't matter when a life hung in the balance. Moving carefully, he lifted the small alien from the pod, surprised by how light she was. Her skin felt warm and slightly scaled, like a snake's, but not unpleasant. She made soft clicking sounds that might have been speech, though he couldn't understand the meaning. Back in his farmhouse, Marcus cleared his kitchen table and began treating the child's injuries. His veterinary supplies were limited, but he had learned to improvise during his years on Nova Terra. The wounds were deep but clean, suggesting they had been caused by sharp debris during the crash. As he worked, the child's eyes followed his every movement, showing an intelligence that was both remarkable and unsettling. The most serious injury was to her left arm, where a piece of metal had punctured deep into the tissue. Marcus cleaned the wound as gently as possible, using his steadiest hands to remove the foreign object. The child whimpered but didn't pull away, as if she understood he was trying to help. Her trust in him was both touching and terrifying. As hours passed, Marcus realized the child's physiology was more similar to Earth mammals than he had expected. Her heartbeat was faster than a human's but followed a familiar rhythm. Her breathing gradually became easier as he treated her injuries and administered basic pain medication. The blue fluid that had been seeping from her wounds began to clot, showing that her body's healing processes were functioning. When the child finally fell asleep, Marcus sat back in his chair and tried to process what had happened. He was harboring an alien child in his home, with no idea what species she belonged to or how she had ended up crashing on his planet. The smart thing would be to contact the authorities, but something held him back. Perhaps it was the way she had looked at him with such trust and gratitude. Or perhaps it was the memory of his own son, lost to a disease that the colonial medical system couldn't cure. The child slept for nearly 20 hours, her body fighting to heal from the trauma of the crash. Marcus stayed nearby, monitoring her, condition and adjusting her position to keep her comfortable. He found himself talking to her, even though she couldn't understand him. He told her about the farm, about the weather patterns on Nova Terra, about anything that came to mind. It felt good to have someone to talk to, even if she couldn't respond. When she finally woke, the child's eyes were clearer and more alert. She sat up slowly, wincing from her injuries, but showing remarkable resilience. Marcus offered her water, which she accepted gratefully. The way she held the cup with careful deliberation showed a level of intelligence and manual dexterity that impressed him. Communication proved to be a challenge. The child spoke in a series of clicks, whistles, and melodic tones that bore no resemblance to any human language. Marcus tried basic gestures, pointing to himself and saying Marcus repeatedly until she seemed to understand. In response, she pointed to herself and made a sound that resembled Kira. He repeated the name, and her face lit up with what could only be described as joy. Over the following days, Marcus and Kira developed a basic system of communication. She was remarkably quick to learn, picking up simple English words and teaching him some of her own language in return. She showed him that her species had a concept of gratitude, repeatedly touching her chest and then his arm while making a specific sound. He understood that she was thanking him for saving her life. Kira proved to be curious about everything on the farm. She followed Marcus around as he worked, watching him tend to his crops and maintain his equipment. Her questions communicated through gestures and simple words, showed an intelligence that far exceeded her apparent age. She seemed particularly fascinated by the way plants grew, spending hours examining his wheat with careful attention. The child's injuries healed with remarkable speed. Within a week, she was walking around the farm, though she still tired easily. Marcus noticed that she seemed to have an instinctive understanding of living things. When one of his chickens fell ill, Kira somehow knew exactly what was wrong and helped him treat the animal. Her knowledge of biology was sophisticated, suggesting she came from an advanced civilization. As the days passed, Marcus found himself growing attached to the child. She had a way of making him laugh with her curiosity and innocent observations about human behavior. She seemed to find his cooking particularly amusing, making faces that transcended species barriers. In return, she showed him how her people prepared food, using techniques that actually improved the flavor of his simple meals. But Marcus knew their peaceful coexistence couldn't last forever. Whoever Kira was, wherever she came from, someone would eventually come looking for her, The crashed pod had been no accident. It was clearly an escape vessel, suggesting she had fled from some kind of danger. The question was whether that danger was still pursuing her and what would happen. When it arrived, as he watched Kira playing with the farm animals, Marcus realized that protecting her had become the most important thing in his life. He had lost his family once before, and he wasn't willing to lose anyone else. Whatever was coming, he would face it. For now, he had found a new purpose in caring for this remarkable child, who had literally fallen from the sky into his life. The bond between them had formed quickly, transcending the barriers of species and language. Marcus had saved Kira's life, but she had saved his soul. Neither of them could have imagined that their quiet life together was about to be shattered by the arrival of forces beyond their comprehension. The confrontation and understanding. First sign of trouble came exactly 1 month after Kira's arrival. Marcus was teaching her to milk the goats when his emergency scanner began screaming alerts across all frequencies. The device, mandatory for all frontier colonists, was designed to detect incoming spacecraft and potential threats. What it was, showing now, made Marcus's blood run cold. 12 massive vessels had appeared at the edge of Novaterra's solar system, each one larger than the colonial transport ships that occasionally visited the planet. The ship's configuration was unlike anything in the human database, with sleek, organic curves that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Their energy signatures were off the charts, suggesting technology far beyond human capabilities. Kira's reaction to the scanner's warnings was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from her blue skin, leaving her pale as moonlight. She clutched Marcus's arm with trembling fingers, her large purple eyes wide with fear. She spoke rapidly in her native language, her voice high and desperate. No, Marcus couldn't understand her words. Her terror was unmistakable. It's okay, Marcus said, kneeling beside her and placing his hands on her shoulders. I won't let anyone hurt you. The promise felt hollow even as he spoke it. What could one human farmer do against 12 alien warships? The ships entered Novaterra's atmosphere with the grace of falling leaves, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that parted the clouds. They arranged themselves in a perfect formation above Marcus's farm, casting shadows that turned day into twilight. The largest vessel, a magnificent craft that seemed to be made of living crystal, descended slowly until it hovered just above the wheat fields. A beam of light, soft and golden, descended from the ship's belly. Within that light, figures began to materialize, not transported in the way humans understood technology, but actually formed from the light itself. The process was beautiful and terrifying, like watching gods descend from heaven. The first figure to solidify was clearly the leader. She stood over 7 feet tall, with the same shimmering blue skin as Kira, but darker, more mature. Her form was humanoid but graceful in a way that suggested both strength and wisdom. She wore garments that seemed to be woven from starlight, itself shifting and flowing with every movement. Most striking were her eyes, the same deep purple as Kira's, but filled with an authority that made Marcus's knees weak. Behind her came a dozen attendants, each one armed with weapons that hummed, with barely contained energy. Their armor was form-fitting and seemed to be alive, responding to their movements and the environment around them. The message was clear. This was a military force, and they were not here for peaceful negotiations. The leader's gaze swept across the farm until it found Marcus and Kira. When she saw the child, her expression changed from cold authority to something far more complex. Relief, anger, and desperate love warred across her features. She spoke a single word in her native language, and Kira responded with a sound that was half sob, half joy. Mother, Kira whispered in English, the word barely audible. She took a step toward the imposing figure, then stopped and looked back at Marcus uncertainly. Marcus felt his world shift. The child he had been caring for, the small being who had become like a daughter to him, was clearly royalty. The woman before him was not just any alien, she was a queen, and Kira was her daughter. The realization hit him like a physical blow, but also explained so much about Kira's intelligence and natural grace. Queen Lysara's voice, when she spoke, resonated with power that seemed to come from the very air around them. Her words were in perfect English, though tinged with an accent that made them sound like music. Human, you will release my daughter immediately. Any harm you have caused her will be repaid tenfold. The threat was clear, but Marcus found himself stepping protectively in front of Kira rather than backing away. No harm has come to her, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. I found her injured and dying. I saved her life. Queen Lysara's eyes narrowed, and the air around them crackled with energy. You expect me to believe that a primitive human succeeded where my own people could not? My daughter has been missing for cycles, and you claim to have found her by accident? I don't care what you believe, Marcus replied, his farmer's stubbornness overriding his fear. I know what I did. I pulled her from a crashed escape pod, treated her injuries, and nursed her back to health. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty as charged. One of the Queen's attendants, a stern-faced individual with elaborate armor, stepped forward. Your Majesty, this human clearly abducted the princess. We should retrieve her and eliminate the witness. The casual way he discussed Marcus's death sparked something in Kira. She darted forward, placing herself between Marcus and the threatening alien. Her small voice carried surprising strength as she spoke rapidly in her native language. Whatever she said caused the Queen to take a step back, surprise replacing anger on her face. She says you are her protector, Queen Lysara said slowly, her voice carrying a note of confusion. She says you saved her life and asked for nothing in return. She says you taught her to laugh again. Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and pain. She's a remarkable child, intelligent, curious, brave. She's been through something terrible, but she never lost her spirit. I'm honored to have known her. The Queen studied Marcus with new interest. You speak of her as if she is your own child. She is, Marcus said simply. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. She crashed into my life when I needed her most, and I'd do anything to protect her. Queen Lysara's expression softened slightly. Show me where you found her. Marcus led the royal party to the crater where Kira's escape pod had landed. The wreckage was still there, testament to the violence of her arrival. The Queen examined the debris with the eye of an expert, her face growing more troubled with each piece she inspected. This pod was designed for emergency evacuation, she said finally. The damage patterns suggest it was fired upon before it crashed. My daughter was fleeing from something. From what? Marcus asked. Queen Lysara's composure cracked slightly. From me, she admitted. From the expectations of royalty, from a life mapped out before her birth. She told me she wanted to see the galaxy, to learn about other species. I forbade it, thinking to protect her. She took an escape pod and fled into space. Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. She's not just your daughter. She's a princess who ran away from home and crashed on a backwater world where she should have died, the Queen continued. But instead, she found a guardian who asked nothing of her except to live. Do you understand what that means to me? Marcus looked at Kira, who was listening intently to the conversation. It means you got your daughter back. It means more than that, Queen Lysara said. It means I was wrong about many things. My people believe that strength comes from power, from the ability to dominate others. But you showed strength by protecting someone weaker than yourself, with no thought of reward. You showed my daughter kindness when she was lost and afraid. The Queen's attendant stepped forward again. Your Majesty, this human is still a primitive. He cannot be trusted with the princess's safety. Queen Lysara turned to face him, her authority blazing like a star. Commander Thane, this human succeeded, where our entire fleet failed. He found my daughter when she was lost, healed her when she was injured, and protected her when she was vulnerable. If that is primitive behavior, then perhaps we have something to learn from primitives. Kira spoke, up again, her voice carrying new confidence. She gestured between Marcus and her mother, speaking in both languages to ensure everyone understood. I want to stay with Marcus, she said in English. He is my family too now. The words hit both adults like a physical blow. Queen Lysara's eyes filled with tears, an emotion Marcus hadn't expected to see from such a powerful being. My daughter wishes to remain with you, she said slowly. But she is heir to the throne of the Valen Empire. She has responsibilities she cannot abandon. Then maybe the Empire can learn something from a human farmer, Marcus suggested. Maybe. Being a good ruler isn't about power and control. Maybe it's about understanding and compassion. Queen Lysara was quiet for a long moment, studying both Marcus and her daughter. You would teach me? She asked finally. I'd be honored to try, Marcus replied. But the lessons go both ways. Kira has already taught me so much about courage and resilience. I think we all have something to learn from each other. The Queen nodded slowly. Very well. We will establish a diplomatic outpost here on Novaterra. My daughter will split her time between learning to rule and learning to live. And you, Marcus Chen, will serve as her advisor and protector. Commander Thane looked scandalized. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. An alien serving as advisor to the Imperial heir? Many things about this situation are unprecedented, Queen Lysara replied. Perhaps it is time for the Valen Empire to try something new. As the royal party prepared to return to their ships, Queen Lysara approached Marcus one final time. I misjudged you, she said simply. I thought you were just another primitive human, but you are something far more valuable. You are a bridge between our species, a reminder that wisdom and compassion can be found in the most unexpected places. I'm just a farmer, Marcus protested. No, the Queen said with a smile. You are a father. And sometimes that is the most important thing anyone can be. Kira hugged Marcus tightly, her small arms barely reaching around his waist. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. As Marcus watched the royal ships disappear into the star-filled sky, he realized that his quiet life as a farmer was over. But in its place, he had gained something far more precious, a daughter who had fallen from the stars, and a future filled with possibilities he had never imagined. The greatest strength he had learned was not in conquering others, but in opening your heart to those who needed protection. And sometimes the most important discoveries were not made in laboratories or battlefields, but in the simple act of choosing compassion over fear in the days that followed as construction began on. The diplomatic outpost and representatives from both species worked to establish formal relations. Marcus continued to tend his farm, but now he did so with Kira at his side, teaching her the simple lessons of growth and patience that came from working the soil. The future was uncertain, but it was bright with promise. And in a small farmhouse on Novaterra, a human farmer and an alien princess continued to prove that family was not about blood or species, but about love, protection, and the choice to stand together against whatever challenges the universe might bring.